Running a business comes with a lot of what-ifs. But luckily, there's a simple answer to them. Shopify. It's the commerce platform behind millions of businesses, including Thrive Cosmetics and Momofuku, and it'll help you with everything you need. From website design and marketing to boosting sales and expanding operations, Shopify can get the job done and make your dream a reality. Turn those what-ifs into... Sign up for your $1 per month trial at shopify.com/special offer.
This is the Roger Stone Show, presented by Colonial Metals Group.
A man who's gone through hell, but he's kept going, and he's smart, and he's strong, and people love him. Not everybody, but people love him and respect him. Roger Stone.
Now, here's Roger Stone.
Welcome back. This is our 2-hour special on the assassination of President John F. Kennedy. We're going to be talking a lot about what we expect to see from the upcoming disclosures ordered by President Donald Trump, who has ordered the declassification and release of all of the records pertaining to the murders of John F. Kennedy, New York Senator Robert F. Kennedy, and the Reverend Martin Luther King. Tyler Nixon is my co-host for today's show. And now we are honored to be joined by Douglas Horne. Douglas Horne graduated cum laude from Ohio State in 1974 with a BA in history. He served on active duty with the U.S. Navy as a surface warfare officer for 10 years, and he worked for the Navy for an additional 10 years in a civil service capacity. Doug Horne joined the JFK Assassinations Record Review Board as a senior analyst on the military records team in 1995 and worked for the ARRB through the final 3 years of its 4-year lifespan. During his tenure there, he was promoted to the position of chief analyst for military records. Doug Horne participated in the review board's deposition of 10 key participants in JFK's autopsy and became the ARRB staff expert on the Zapruder film of JFK's assassination. We're honored to have Doug Horne join us today on The Roger Stone Show.
Hello.
Oh, there he is. Thank you. Thanks for joining us. Tyler,
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tyler. You want to take the lead here because there's a lot of material. Doug is going to join us for 2 segments because he has a lot to reveal.
Sure. First of all, go to YouTube, and it's Douglas Horne, and Horne was with an E, JFK Assassination, and that's Doug's YouTube page, Douglas Horne JFK Assassination. You'll find some extremely compelling videos. I don't want to waste any time, Doug. It's great to have you on. So we'll jump right into it. Could you give us, say, maybe the top 3 or whatever comes to mind? Your time in the ARRB had to be absolutely fascinating, and so much information came out thanks to yours and your fellow staff members' work. What would you say were the blockbuster revelations for you that came out?
Thank you, Tyler. I'll talk about the 2 most important documents that my team got released, the military records team. The first would be the complete meeting minutes for Secretary of Defense McNamara's Vietnam conference in Honolulu, Hawaii in May of 1963. So before we got the 213-page set of minutes released in full, all we had was a 4-page summary written by one of the people who attended the conference. And, that's not good enough. So we got all 213 pages, and to make a long story short, they verify that McNamara reviewed the plans to withdraw all the advisors from Vietnam. We didn't have combat troops in Vietnam. We only had advisors. And he said, these withdrawal plans are not fast enough. They have to be accelerated. And furthermore, he said, we're going to withdraw 1,000 men by the end of the year, and we don't want them to be individuals. We want them to be complete units. And he made it clear that he wanted the plans for withdrawal accelerated and that we would be out of there completely by the end of 1965. So those minutes are very important because they show how early these things were being put in place. Now, all those plans were later codified. They were made official on October 11th, 1963, in National Security Action Memo 263. A lot of your audience will know about that already. But this was being talked about in May, early May of 63 at an official meeting. So we're proud that we got all those minutes released. And the other document, I think, is about 10 times more important. It's called the Northwoods File. So the Northwoods File was something developed by the Joint Chiefs of Staff in 1962 about Cuba. And the Northwoods File was a list of pretexts, lies upon which the U.S. could justify a full-scale invasion of Cuba. So this is before the Cuban Missile Crisis. This is in March of 1962. And so this list of pretexts or lies justifying war were forwarded to the Secretary of Defense by the chairman of the JCS, General Lyman Lemnitzer, on March 13th, 1962. And they included a number of outrageous ideas to justify a U.S. invasion. So one idea was to put friendly Cubans, the ones that had gone to the U.S., to put them in Castro uniforms and have them simulate an attack on the base at Guantanamo. And we would blame that on Castro. Another idea was to sink a U.S. ship, to sink it ourselves in Guantanamo Bay and blame the sinking on Castro, kind of like a revisiting of the Remember the Maine incident in 1898, which torched off the Spanish-American War in Havana.
And the
USS
Liberty subsequently, though that was not Vietnam, but similarly a pretext.
Yes, the Liberty incident in 67, I think it was a very similar concept. And so I think the two worst ideas in Northwoods, there were two that were really bad. One was to have an American jet, a fighter jet, an F-86, which is a fighter plane used in the Korean War, to have it painted like it was Cuban Air Force, and to simulate an attack on a real airliner, firing blanks, but making close passes where the pilots would say, hey, we're being attacked by the Cuban Air Force. And that idea was stupid because if anybody had taken pictures of the F-86 out the window, any of the passengers, it would have been obvious it was not a Soviet MiG in the Cuban Air Force. It was an American-made jet. So that was a dumb idea. And the worst idea of all, the most stunning, it sounds like something from a James Bond movie, was to have a charter airliner take off from the East Coast en route somewhere in Latin America. And with a flight plan that said, we're going to fly over Cuba. And the plane would secretly land in Florida at Eglin Air Force Base and discharge all the passengers. Now, the passengers were to be CIA assets, okay? So they were going to be members of the intelligence community, and they would safely get off the airplane. And then at Eglin Air Force Base, an identical airliner, painted the same way, would take off and would be operated as a drone over Cuba with nobody on board. And that this identical airliner would then be blown up over Cuba.
9/11 anyone?
After playing a tape that said, hey, we're being attacked by Cuban aircraft. Then it would be blown up, and then we would justify an invasion by saying Castro shot down an airliner full of people. Now, not only is this shocking, but it's really stupid because there would have been an international investigation, and it would have revealed, hey, there's no bodies at the crash site.
Yeah,
so
and it would have been over Cuba, apparently. So they would have had control of that. But well, Doug, I don't want to get too much into the weeds of the higher level stuff because you've got great, explosive revelations in the X-rays. But I think Roger, I believe you have a message to share.
Yes, we're going to have to go to a quick commercial break here. One of the things that always interested me is that the Warren Commission was never actually given the actual X-rays of JFK. They were given an artist's rendered illustration of them. For some reason, my old friend Senator Arlen Specter, later a senator from Pennsylvania, but at that point, the district attorney of Philadelphia, essentially on loan to the Warren Commission, had no problem with that. We're going to come back and talk about the medical evidence with our guest, Douglas Horne. By the way, he has a 5-volume memoir of the JFK medical cover-up entitled Inside the ARRB, and he also has a collection of essays entitled JFK's War with the National Security Establishment. They're both extraordinarily compelling. I urge you to get them. But before we get to that, a quick message from our sponsor.
Now, it's time for Protecting Your Future, sponsored by Colonial Metals Group. Here's Roger Stone.
You know, in these turbulent economic time, with the national debt out of control and not sustainable, and with our government just printing money like it's going out of style, now is the time to protect your future, to protect your retirement, to protect your nest egg, your IRA, and your 401k. And the best way you can do that is by acquiring precious metals like gold and silver. The people that I trust to do this are the folks at the Colonials Metals Group. And you can reach them at colonialsmetalsgroup.com/stone, or you can send for your free goldguide.com. They'll walk you through all the benefits of diversifying your portfolio with gold. So contact the folks at colonialmetalsgroup.com/stone, and please do it today. You'll be glad you did.
This is the Roger Stone Show. Richard Nixon, Ronald Reagan, George W. Bush, and Donald Trump.
They went after a guy named Roger Stone, who's sitting in the office. And I'll say this in front of Roger, he's no baby. And right now, he's cleaner than anybody in this place. No, they treated him very unfairly.
All of these presidents relied on one man to secure their seat in the Oval Office. That man is Roger Stone.
Roger Stone.
This is the Roger Stone Show, presented by Colonial Metals Group. Now, here's Roger Stone.
And we're back in our 2-hour special on the John F. Kennedy assassination. We're talking to Tyler Nixon, my personal attorney and a longtime researcher into the JFK assassination. But we're particularly honored to have with us Douglas Horne, who served as a senior analyst on the Assassinations Record Review Board, or ARRB. We're just about to get into the medical evidence pertaining to the murder of President John F. Kennedy. When we had to take a quick commercial break, and now we're back with Tyler Nixon and Douglas Horne. Gentlemen, let's proceed.
Well, I would say real quick, again, go to Douglas Horne, JFK Assassination on YouTube. That's his Doug's YouTube page, and it's got a great detailed videos, hours long, going into absolute meticulous detail. But for today, though, we only have a short amount of time. But Doug, I'm going to let you take it away with what you found in the X-rays. That's probably never been posited before, but is totally plausible.
Thank you. So all you have to do is type in on your search engine Douglas Horne with more on the JFK assassination, and the YouTube channel will pop up, and you'll see many video presentations, including one on the skull X-rays, which is very recent, and I'm very proud of it. So here's what I've learned about the JFK skull X-rays. What I'm doing in that program on my YouTube site is reporting the work of two men, Dr. David Mantic, who's an MD and a PhD in physics, and Dr. Mike Chesser, who's also an MD. And in a nutshell, the JFK skull X-rays today prove that JFK was hit by 3 headshots, not one headshot, as claimed by the Warren Commission. So what we really have in the X-rays today are evidence that he was shot once from behind, low in the back of the head. And by the way, it wasn't from the book depository either. And he was shot twice from the front, twice from the right front. So that's pretty startling information if you haven't ever heard it before. So you can find the evidence for this in my presentation on my YouTube channel. But let me summarize what I just said in a more specific way, if I can. And then I'll talk about the fact that there's also some fraud in the skull X-rays. So what's new in the skull X-rays that was not reported by the Warren Commission or the Clark panel in 1968 or the House Select Committee on Assassinations, what people need to know now is that there is evidence in the lateral skull X-rays of an entry wound in the right temple, just at the height of the right ear, inside the hair, just forward of the right ear in the right temple, and there's another entry wound high in the right forehead, about 4 inches above the corner of the right eye. So those are things that are clearly visible in the X-rays if you know what you're looking at, and I've explained what to look at in my presentation, and which were not reported by the HSCA medical panel or by the Warren Commission or the Clark panel, which I find very disturbing. So, Dr. Mantic, one of the two men whose work I'm reporting on, has been to the archives 9 times. I want your audience to understand that. With the permission of the Kennedy family, he's been 9 times. He studied the X-rays extensively with an optical densitometer. He's discovered evidence of forgery, partial forgery, in the skull X-rays, namely that the large exit wound seen at Parkland Hospital in Dallas, the blowout in the right rear of the head, the blowout from a frontal shot, has been covered up in the lateral X-rays, covered up with a very bright white patch, which hides the fact that there's missing brain tissue and bone in that area. So he's discovered that forgery in the lateral X-rays, and he's discovered a false apparent bullet fragment, which is really not a bullet fragment, it's just light blasting on the skull, which is supposed to incriminate the accused assassin, Lee Harvey Oswald, but that object on the front-to-back skull X-ray, the AP X-ray, is fraudulent. So if you were to read his book, The Final Analysis by Dr. David Mantic, you'll get a good explanation of how he discovered these things in 9 visits to the archives, and he'll present his optical densitometry data for you to understand. The other physician who I'm reporting on, Dr. Chesser, is the expert on the right temporal entrance wound and the forehead entrance wound, and I really respect his work also. He's a neurologist, so he's very accustomed to looking at
now, did not Dr.
skull
Chesser,
X-rays and brains.
Didn't Dr. Chesser note the what they call, I guess, the scatter of metallic? I'm sorry, what are they? the name escapes me. What the term is for it.
The metallic snowstorm. Yes,
snow.
Tyler. So the most important thing to understand about this forehead bullet is that if you go to the National Archives in person, like Dr. Chesser did, you will see something that you don't see published in the House Committee report. So what you'll see is a metallic snowstorm of a bullet beginning to disintegrate as soon as it enters high in the forehead. And this metallic snowstorm of 30 or 40 particles is visible if you go and look at it in person, but most people are not allowed to do that. So he's reported on that. He's busted these people.
And again, the significance of that is that the snowstorm indicates a direction from front to rear.
Yes, thank you, Tyler. So here's the deal. When a frangible bullet, a bullet that's a hunting bullet, is not a full metal jacket, when it enters a body, it begins to disintegrate immediately, and the smallest particles get deposited first. And then as you go through the fragment trail in the X-ray, then the particles become larger, and then farther along in the fragment trail, the fragments are much bigger. So the direction of travel in that fragment trail on the lateral X-ray is clearly from front to back, because the smallest particles were deposited at the front and the biggest particles were at the back of the fragment trail in the upper rear of the head.
When we come back, I want to ask Doug Horne about the throat wound. We know that Congressman Gerald Ford, a member of the Warren Commission, at the request of J. Edgar Hoover, actually physically changed the autopsy diagram, moving what was indicated by Dr. Berkeley, who was the Kennedy's physician, took a depiction of a wound in Kennedy's upper back and changed it to his neck. We also know that a tracheotomy was produced so that it would be difficult to determine whether that throat wound was an exit wound or an entry wound. This, by the way, was reported by the New York Times. And when Gerald Ford, later president of the United States, was asked why he had changed the diagram, he said, well, the country needed closure. We're going to ask Doug Horne about that when we come back. Folks, you've tuned in to our 2-hour special on the John F. Kennedy assassination. We're honored to have Douglas Horne. He's with us with another segment. We're going to be talking more about the medical evidence, and then we're going to focus about what happened to John F. Kennedy's body immediately after the assassination. Don't go away. We'll be right back. You're listening to The Roger Stone Show here on the Red Apple Audio Network.
Impact confirmed. The Slayer has been activated.
Demonic threat level increasing.
Hold the line!
All the power of hell cowering before one man.
id Software presents Doom, The Dark Ages. Available now on Xbox Series X and S, PlayStation 5, and PC.
Rated M for mature.
Hey guys, have you heard of Goldbelly? It's this amazing site where they ship the most iconic famous foods from restaurants across the country, anywhere, nationwide. I've never found a more perfect gift than food. They ship Chicago deep dish pizza, New York bagels, Maine lobster rolls, and even Ina Garten's famous cakes. So if you're looking for a gift for the food lover in your life, head to goldbelly.com and get 20% off your first order with promo code GIFT.
Faraday presenta Ojos con Alergia y Picazón contra el Jardinero. Y el ganador es Faraday Extra Fuerte. Para aliviar la picazón de los ojos por alergia, actúa más rápido y supera a Claritin y Flonase aún a las 24 horas. Faraday, adelante.
This episode is brought to you by Factor. Optimize your nutrition this year with Factor, America's #1 ready-to-eat meal service. Factor's fresh, never-frozen meals are dietitian-approved, ready to eat in just 2 minutes. Choose from 40 weekly options across 8 dietary preferences like Calorie Smart, Protein Plus, and Keto. Eat smarter at factormeals.com/listen50 and use code LISTEN50 for 50% off plus free shipping on your first box. Factormeals.com/listen50, code LISTEN50. T's and C's apply.
This is the Roger Stone Show, presented by Colonial Metals Group.
A man who's gone through hell, but he's kept going, and he's smart, and he's strong, and people love him. Not everybody, but people love him and respect him. Roger Stone.
Now, here's Roger Stone.
And we're back with our 2-hour special on the assassination of President John Fitzgerald Kennedy on November 22nd in 1963. We are hopeful that the coming revelations ordered through executive order for the declassification of all of the documents pertaining to John F. Kennedy's murder will reveal many of the things we're going to talk about today, because many of them have not been publicly reported, or if they have not gotten the mainstream media attention that they merit. We're talking to Douglas Horne, who was a senior analyst for the Assassinations Record Review Board, an expert on the JFK's autopsy. Also, and we'll get to this, the famous Zapruder film of John F. Kennedy's assassination. To return to the question we were chatting about before we took a break, I'm interested, Doug, in your views regarding the wound in President John F. Kennedy's throat. As I said, as a member of the Warren Commission, Congressman Gerald Ford, at the request of J. Edgar Hoover, actually takes a pencil and changes the diagram on the official autopsy, moving the wound from Kennedy's upper back to his neck. And then later, between the time that the body goes from Parkland Hospital to the Bethesda Medical Center, there's been a tracheotomy to hide the fact as to whether that was an entry wound or an exit wound. Doug, what say you?
Okay, well, we all know that Ford conducted oral plastic surgery and changed a back wound to a neck wound. Yes, that's correct. What everybody needs to understand, if they're not real familiar with this case, is that all of the Dallas treating physicians were certain on the day he was treated that Kennedy had an entrance wound in his throat, in the front of his neck, an entrance wound fired from the front. And the tracheotomy was performed to allow the insertion of a breathing tube at Parkland Hospital. Now, the problem is that later at the autopsy, I would say, look, you got to understand what happened to his body. It's one of the questions you mentioned before we went on break. This is all interrelated, so if I may digress a bit, I'll get back to the throat wound in a minute. Air Force One landed at Andrews at 6 o'clock p.m. on the day of the assassination. And at 6:10, Kennedy's body supposedly, although it really didn't supposedly, let's put it this way, his casket left at 10 minutes after 6 in a motorcade going to Bethesda Naval Hospital. That motorcade did not arrive with this Dallas ornate coffin in it until 6:55 p.m. It took quite a while to get there, 6:55 p.m. The problem is that the chain of custody of his body was interrupted, and his body actually arrived at 6:35 p.m. by helicopter before the motorcade arrived from Andrews. So what does this mean? It means quite a bit. First of all, the review board obtained the document, the Marine Corps report of Sergeant Boysian, that says the president's casket arrived at 6:35 p.m. And we have witnesses that say it arrived in the wrong kind of car. It arrived in a black hearse and in the wrong kind of casket. It arrived in a shipping casket, a cheap aluminum shipping casket at 6:35. The motorcade didn't arrive out front until 20 minutes later, and then that car sat out front for 12 or 13 minutes before moving. So what I want the audience to understand is that the autopsy of record didn't really start until shortly after 8 o'clock p.m. And between 6:35, when JFK arrived early by helicopter from Andrews, between 6:35 and 8 o'clock, the wounds were tampered with simply to get access to the brain. So the brain was sanitized by removing all the metal they could find in the brain. That's what was done before the autopsy of record started. So the crime scene was sanitized. All the metal they could find was removed from the brain, and by the way, a bullet was removed from his back, also from between his ribs. So by the time the autopsy started at 8 o'clock, the crime scene had already been violated. And we know this happened because we have two witnesses to this postmortem surgery, a mortician named Tom Robinson and one of the X-ray technicians, Ed Reed, who told us about this under oath in 1997. And I just want people to understand that there was a lot of metal removed from his body that never made it into the official record. So there were 10 tiny fragments removed from the brain in a vial, a test tube. They were never introduced into the official record. There were 4 large bullet fragments, probably more than one bullet, but not quite enough metal to form 2 bullets, but a lot of large metal fragments, 4 of them, removed from his body. And we interviewed the guy that typed the receipt for that. But the federal agent who wanted the receipt took the receipt, the typewriter ribbon, and the fragments with him, and they were never introduced into the official record. So these things are facts. They can't be denied. And getting back to the throat wound, I'd like to make 2 points. First of all, the autopsy photographs show a large gash in the throat, and it's much bigger than the incision that was made at Parkland Hospital. So somebody tampered with that tracheotomy and made it a lot bigger. And actually, in the photograph, it looks like it might be an exit wound, but it was not that large at Parkland Hospital. So it's, according to Dr. Crenshaw, who was one of the treating physicians at Parkland in Dallas, the gash in the photographs from Bethesda Naval Hospital is twice as wide than it was in Parkland. So somebody tampered with that wound before those photographs were taken. And I would tell the audience one more thing. There were 4 sets of conclusions about how he was killed, about how JFK was killed in the first 2 weeks after his death. If your only goal is the truth, you don't have 4 sets of conclusions, folks. So all they cared about was what could be sold to the American people. And I'm telling you now that this nonsense about a bullet transiting from a wound high in the back out the front of the throat, this fiction, this fairy tale, was only the last conclusion. So that was in the final version of the autopsy conclusions, in the final autopsy report. But there were 3 sets of conclusions before that that did not posit a transiting bullet. They said there was a shot in the back and no exit for the shot in the back. So there's no reason at all to believe that a bullet went from JFK's back out his throat, and there's no reason at all to believe in the single bullet theory. So that's that.
The importance here.
And there's probably no reason to believe in the Bethesda doctor's findings for sure. I mean, that was they were busy essentially doctoring evidence at the same time as they're supposed to be doing an autopsy, and they're botching it.
Well, the other thing we know is that the doctors at Bethesda were being overseen by a military group, and that General Curtis LeMay, who hated the Kennedys, ordered the removal of John F. Kennedy's testicles, which had nothing whatsoever to do with the autopsy, but speaks volumes about the politicized nature of this investigation. We also know that James Tague, who I interviewed for my book, was a car salesman, had gone down to the site to see the motorcade, and a bullet had hit the curb where he was standing, and a fleck of cement bounced up and grazed his cheek, and he was bleeding. This was seen by a Dallas County Sheriff's officer who insisted that he report immediately to the Dallas police, and he did, expecting that he would hear from them, but he heard nothing. He knew that a bullet had landed essentially at his feet, and he knew, therefore, that the public claims of only 3 shots, all from the back, he knew that there was an additional shot. When he went back to look at the curb, it had already been patched where the bullet hit the curb, and it is only because he was telling this story in a bar, it was overheard by James McNeil, later of the McNeil Air Report, later an AP reporter, and suddenly Arlen Specter had an extra bullet, and thus was born the single bullet theory, an extraordinary fiction. We'll be right back. This is the Roger Stone Show, and we have our 2-hour special on the assassination of President John F. Kennedy, so please don't go away.
This is the Roger Stone Show. Richard Nixon, Ronald Reagan, George W. Bush, and Donald Trump.
They went after a guy named Roger Stone, who's sitting in the office. And I'll say this in front of Roger, he's no baby. And right now, he's cleaner than anybody in this place. No, they treated him very unfairly.
All of these presidents relied on one man to secure their seat in the Oval Office. That man is Roger Stone.
Roger Stone.
This is the Roger Stone Show, presented by Colonial Metals Group. Now, here's Roger Stone.
And we're back with our 2-hour special on the assassination of President John F. Kennedy, the 35th President of the United States. I'm joined by Douglas Horne, who is a senior analyst for the JFK Assassination Records Review Board, and Tyler Nixon, my personal attorney, but a longtime JFK researcher. I want to turn now to the Zapruder film. This, of course, was a film taken by Abraham Zapruder, immediately seized by the government using one of the early video cameras. When I interviewed Arlen Specter for my book, The Man Who Killed Kennedy, The Case Against LBJ, I got him to admit that the Zapruder film was missing frames. So, Doug, tell us, since you are one of the staff experts on this film, which was later sold to Time magazine and kept away from the American public for decades. What was going on with the Zapruder film?
Well, Roger, it's been altered in 3 different ways, and I'm absolutely certain about this. I'll tell the audience what's been altered, and then I'll explain how I know this. First of all, crude black patches have been applied to cover up the exit wound in the right rear of the head. This is the blowout, the occipital parietal blowout that the Parkland doctors saw in Dallas. That's been covered up with crude animation, black patches. And there are 2 patterns of exit debris that have been removed from the film. One pattern of exit debris went back and to the left. That's the exit debris that hit the 2 motorcycle cops. And the other exit debris pattern went straight up in the air, very high in the air. And those 2 patterns of debris have been removed. And that head explosion you see in frame 313, folks, I got to tell you, that's artwork. That's paint. That's a visual effect. So one of the people that I'm proud that I've interviewed, this is after the review board shut down, is Dino Brugione of the CIA. He worked at the CIA's National Photographic Interpretation Center in Washington, and that's the photo interpretation center that did the U-2 photographs for the Cuban Missile Crisis and the Corona satellite photos of Soviet missile sites, etc. And he worked with the original Zapruder film on Saturday night, Saturday, November 23rd, before it was altered. He saw a massive head explosion that went 3 or 4 feet into the air. He clarified later, which you don't see in the Zapruder film, he clarified later that there was a piece of brain tissue or a part of JFK's head that went about 1.5 feet into the air, surrounded by all this white mist. And folks, you don't see that in the film. So I think that's exit debris from the forehead bullet. And then, of course, you don't see the exit debris that went to the left rear either in the film, that hit the 2 motorcycle cops to the left rear of the limousine. You don't see that in the film. So he made briefing boards Saturday night, November 23rd. Then the agents that had brought him the film from Chicago, they took the film somewhere, and we know where they took it. They took it to Kodak headquarters in Rochester, New York. And the film was altered on Sunday, November 24th, crudely altered, I would add, at the Kodak's Research and Development Center called Hawkeye Works, under the direction of the CIA. And this altered film, the sanitized film, showed up again at the NPIC in Washington 24 hours later on Sunday night. So by then the film's been sanitized, and additional briefing boards were made, just paste-ups, blow-ups of individual frames. And those briefing boards survive today. Those are the briefing boards made from the sanitized film on Sunday night. But the briefing boards made by Brugione 24 hours earlier of the film before it was altered, those have not survived. They've been deep-sixed. So this is one heck of a story. I devoted a lot of time to it in Volume 4 of my book. And there's a great video online you can watch on YouTube called The Zapruder Film Mystery, in which Dino Brugione talks at length about his briefing board event on Saturday. And he says, no, I didn't make the briefing boards that survived today. Mine disappeared. I didn't make these. So he tells the whole story, or most of it, online, and I encourage people to watch that.
Interestingly, Dan Rather, one of the few journalists to be shown the Zapruder film, insists that Kennedy's head snaps sharply forward.
That's right.
Which, of course, is inaccurate. Some decades later, we would see the film, and Kennedy's head snaps back and to the left. Why would Dan Rather lie about this?
He didn't lie. I'm going to surprise your audience by saying the following. Both Dan Rather and Cartha DeLoach of the FBI, they saw the film before it was altered. They saw unaltered versions of the film. So that snapping forward came from the Daltex building. That shot came from directly behind the limousine from the Daltex. That was the first of the 3 headshots. So they're seeing the film before it's altered. So what was removed from the film was evidence of multiple headshots happening very close on top of each other. They couldn't have that in the film. So you had a brief car stop removed. A car stop of 2 or 3 seconds was removed from the film, and evidence of multiple headshots falling one on top of each other. And so now the film doesn't show the head going forward. It shows the head going back into the left, and I'm going to surprise your audience again and say the rapidity of that motion, the violence of that back into the left, is because so many frames were removed of the exit debris going to the left rear. If you take a film and you remove a significant number of frames, when it's played back, the motion speeds up because you've taken frames out of the film. So all I'm telling you is that Dan Rather and Cartha DeLoach saw an unaltered film, unaltered same-day copies that were made, and the film now doesn't show what they saw, and the film now doesn't show the two patterns of exit debris. But I can assure you that there were two patterns of exit debris, one back into the left and one straight up in the air.
All right, we have to leave it there. I want to thank our guest, Douglas Horne, for joining us today with all these truth bombs about the Kennedy assassination. Tyler Nixon's going to stay with us. You're listening to our 2-hour special on the Kennedy assassination. So whatever you do, don't touch that dial.